Well, yeah. All right. So now that tangent's done,
That
rabbit
was a good one,
trail.
though.
Yeah,
It was a good
decent.
one. I appreciated it. I learned.
Oh man, we're becoming knowledge holics these days. Oh, I didn't know that. What else you got to tell me? I don't know.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Bearded Bible Brothers. I'm Matt Crosswhite, joined by Josiah Marshall.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I've had a rough day, but it's getting better just by sitting and talking with you. So it's
Aww. Flush.
yes, yeah. Just cover your head. You don't want it to look like you've been sunburned.
Hey, now. For our audience that's only ever listened to us and hasn't seen our YouTube, I am very bald. If you weren't able to deduce that already from Mr. Josiah's hilarity.
Well, that's the second joke of the day. I've done it.
The fact that you're hilarious. I think your kids would agree. I don't know that your wife would, but your kids probably would.
Oh, she'd just shake her head and sigh. The kids would probably laugh. I know I get the kids laughing. Well, I remember a few months, last year, I was on some medication that made me very loopy, and it was the only time I ever took it during the day. I usually took it when I went to sleep, but I took it during the day, and at one point I was holding up a glass of water to the light coming through the window and telling my daughter, "Hey, look through the light," or "Look through the water, see the light," and they were busting a gut. They thought it was just so funny that Dad was just so out of his skull.
Of course. I love that you tell a story from last year, though, as if you haven't made your kids laugh since then.
Oh, I'm sure I have. That was just the one that really popped in my head because just the other day, the kids asked, "Hey, Dad, when are you going to take that medication again? I haven't seen you take it lately."
That's funny.
Yeah, it was a funny moment, and it was definitely one for the books, that's for sure.
Okay.
But what are we going to talk about?
Well, speaking of one for the books, we are going to talk about knowledgeaholism. Knowledgeaholics.
Knowledgeaholism. Yeah.
The pursuit of knowledge to the point of obsession.
Right. It's like this euphoric plateau that everybody just keeps trying to go for. And they keep trying to wander around trying to get somewhere higher. Oh my word, I said the word higher, and it reminds me of that old Creed song, "Can you take me higher?" There you go. There's another one for the books. I made Matt chuckle.
You should let them sing it.
Thanks a lot. But yeah, so we're in a time of knowledge, aren't we?
We are.
Wow. The amount of knowledge we have in our hands is kind of unreal when you really think about it.
Right? Yep.
Did you ever think you'd ever not have to lug around textbooks?
Well, okay, confession time. I am an auditory learner, and so I only bought the textbooks when I was doing my undergrad. I only bought the textbooks for the first 2 years because I never ended up opening them, and there was no point in paying $120 a book for something to get dusty on my shelf. As long as I showed up to class and paid attention, I did just fine. So I had to do more of textbook reading when I was getting my master's, but
oh, sure, yep, that makes sense.
But that even that was online, so I didn't do much book lugging around particularly.
Oh, that's good.
But there always was the mad dash for the library when the professor assigned something from the textbook and you got to go
Yeah,
get the book and figure out what the assignment was because you didn't actually
right,
purchase it.
right. Did you ever have one of those professors that were very footnote driven? They would
Uh,
throw in a question on a question or on an exam or quiz that was directly out of the footnotes.
I wouldn't know because I never opened the book.
Even in the library?
That was only to get the assignment.
Oh, okay.
Then I do the assignment based on what I heard them say in class.
Oh, okay. I had one professor that would do that. He liked to throw in questions that were out of the footnotes to see if anybody was actually doing the reading and if they were reading thoroughly, as he would put it. So there was always groans. There was always groans in his class when he'd say stuff like that.
Right? Like that's
yeah.
I get why, and if I was a professor I might do the same thing. But
yeah.
that's just mean.
Well, yeah, I would say it's mean, but I tell you, it was often very entertaining too because you'd see everybody.
You were the one that did all the reading. It was entertaining because you were never on the short end of it.
Maybe.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe. But so let's ask a question about this then. Why would somebody want to pursue knowledge just for the sake of knowing something?
That's a good question.
Oh.
Are we talking the world in general, or are we talking Christendom?
Well, let's start with the world in general, because I think by doing that, we get an observation, just more of an objective one, at least, into just the operation of an individual. Because I would even look at that to say that some people might do that, while it may be somewhat euphoric, perhaps, and saying, "Oh, I learned something new today," and it's it's scintillating, it's captivating. But I think another element of that could be even psychological, to say by acquiring all this knowledge, they think that having that knowledge and then sharing that knowledge will get them the attention they seek. And I wouldn't say that it's always negative attention they seek, but it's just the opportunity to be seen and heard.
Yep.
Would
absolutely.
you agree?
There's a lot of identity and worth and value that comes in our society from being a smart person or being perceived as a smart person.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sorry. I mean, you said that, and it just really just dawned on me that, yeah, especially I remember back in the 80s, there was a lot of movements going on that were trying to say we need to start capitalizing on kids' education and making sure they're moving forward with the right knowledge. And I think that there has been a ripple effect of that through the time, and we've seen what can culminate today. How much is what a person's knowledge is influencing, say, the behavior that we see on campuses of rioters sitting and vehement on their position, and it's as if knowledge has really taken control and created almost a knowledge warfare almost on college campuses these days. Now, if I was to go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I think that was true when on college campuses, maybe in the 70s and 80s and 90s, maybe into the 90s. But if you watch some of the videos of like man on the street, people walk around just with their cell phone camera and ask the protesters, the students on campuses, so why are you here? What are you protesting? What's your position on whatever issue it is? Most of them have no idea why they're even there.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Often they say we were paid to be here, or all my friends are here. And
Yeah.
they were asked like questions about, so obviously I'm fairly personally invested in Israel and love and appreciate Israel, and my family and I will be moving there. And so um, when after October 7th last year, and Israel went into Gaza and stuff, and all the protests on the college campuses, they were all chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." That we watched several videos of people going on campus non-threateningly, simply asking, "Okay, which river and which sea?" And the students had no idea. They had no idea what they were doing, or why they were there, or what they were protesting. So
Very true.
I think there was a push of making sure that students and youth are understanding, and having a good knowledge of important things. But I think in modernity, it's actually shifted. Well, you could say the same thing, but it comes down to the question of who decides what the good things are. And I don't think that's the point of our podcast today.
Well, it could be, because when we think of the word knowledge in let's say, a scriptural context, one phrase that pops to mind is the knowledge of good and evil. And recently, I've had some fascinating conversations about that with some people, specifically, because what we would say in our own English perspective, or Western perspective, would be that the knowledge of good and evil is just simply the knowledge to be able to have, okay, so that's evil and that's good, the ability to be able to discern which is which. But in reality, I think a lot more goes into it than that, because what it's really establishing is that we now have the ability to say what's good, say what's evil. You're still identifying good and evil, but now you're identifying it on your own terms. You're identifying it from your own position. Whereas before, it was just God saying, well, this is good, and this is good, and this is good. And even almost by default, then you'd realize, okay, so chaos is comparatively evil. I wouldn't say objectively or absolutely evil, but definitely saying that chaos then would be the opposite of what's being declared good. It's just say in Genesis chapter 1. And so this could be applied to the situations on campuses. And the thought that I had going through my head when I said that about campuses these days, because I saw a video the other day of somebody taking video on their phone of this. It looked like a fenced area, like an occupation. There were tents, there were barricades set up, and there was loud noise coming from not only the encampment, which looked like maybe was in the center of a campus, maybe one of those open areas, but other noise was being blared over speakers so that they could prevent the protesters from sleeping or something like that. And
oh wow,
even in that place setting, the idea of what we think is right and wrong impacts more and more people, because then you're not even thinking about the other people that happen to live in the neighborhood who are trying to sleep, who have jobs in the morning, who have kids that need to get up and go to school. It just creates more and more chaos, which I think definitely goes into talking about standards. But at the same time, knowledge for the sake of knowledge is, as King Solomon put it, exhausting.
Yes.
What was that? Ecclesiastes 13, too much study wearies the body?
I think it's 13, yeah.
Or 12, yeah, something like that. But I remember, so my grandmother, I know I've mentioned her before. Wow, it's actually been quite a while since I've mentioned her, but she had 5 degrees, 3 bachelor's and 2 master's degrees. And this was back when school was affordable. But she told me one time, because I said to her, I was young, I was very young, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. I said to her, Moo, I'm going to have the exact same amount of degrees as you. And she says, well, that's good, but there's something along with it that you might want to know. And I said, yeah, what's that? She said, the more you learn, the less you know.
Yep.
But she also added, the more you learn, the heavier things get.
Ooh, yes.
And I like that a lot. It's like, ooh, okay, yeah, I get where you're going with that, because I think we could even almost take the knowledge approach and look at it as the yoke that Jesus is talking about. Because here's the Pharisees throwing all of this knowledge, saying this is what you're supposed to do. And it's while that pressure is added to those person's lives, just this idea of I've got to keep track of how many steps I take, how many movements I make with my arm, the activities I'm doing throughout a given day. That knowledge itself can be very loud and very conflicting with just the basic need to just have quiet in your life.
Yeah.
So you can function, at least in somewhat of a more healthier way, because boy, that the noise of knowledge, it's really quite interesting just to even think of that. The noise of knowledge. What do you think of when I say that? Noise of knowledge, what is that prompting you?
It honestly, it brings back a memory that's a little bit off topic, but
well, share it.
Let's
do rabbit trails.
I read a book years ago that it was called Fluent Forever, and it was about learning different languages and the best methodologies and stuff like that. And okay. And this author was talking about how once you really master a language, you forever have a statesman from that place jabbering in the back corner of your brain. And so let's say you learn French. He says you will always and forever have a Frenchman jabbering away in your head.
Yeah.
And then I think this individual, the author, had learned like 4 or 5 languages. So he had competing multi-ethnic voices in his head in a non-schizophrenic sort of way. So when you said that's what popped into my head, but not that that's relevant necessarily to what we're talking about.
Well, the crazy thing is that in some ways, I was actually thinking of something quite similar. I remember when we were first married, my wife I would scare my wife with talking in my sleep in different languages, no less. And
yes, I love this story.
All right, I'll tell this story, but I'll give it the short version, the condensed, abridged. So I would just start arguing with myself in Native American languages, and it'd scare her. Or the worst one was she woke up to me yelling in a different language, and then confronted me the next day, and she found out what sounded like the most angriest moment of my night turned out to be me reciting Psalm 23 in Klingon. So it was definitely very chaotic for her and very noisy, to say the least, especially when she's trying to sleep. But I remember I vaguely recall telling her that in those moments when my sleep, I remember having dreams in other languages. And I've talked to other people who are very fluent in other languages. In some cases, they're even polyglots, and so they'll have dreams where they have different people in their dreams talking in different languages to each other. And while that doesn't directly tie in with knowledge, it's definitely a process of knowledge, because when you're looking at language is a transmission conduit, meaning that it's going to convey what's going on in your head to the outside world, and it's going to convey what's going on in the outside world into your head, and into your heart. Really, I mean, you're looking at something that's basically a transaction going on here. And when it comes down to knowledge, some knowledge, you get that little kid coming up to you and saying, "Hey, do you know what the heaviest rock in the world is?" And they drop whatever the case may be. I don't even know it off the top of my head. Or you've got the long-winded professor in college taking 3 hours to explain one simple idea.
Yeah.
Right? So it becomes this paradox of trying to find that nice little balance. Oh, what's going to be a good balance for me? And if we were to go back into just even college in general, but even into religious studies, oh man, I remember situations where the explanation of a verse would be pages long, and it wouldn't really get anywhere. Unfortunately, I had more questions after than I did before, and it wasn't in the positive way, right?
Right.
It's not leading, oh, let's ask this question. No, it's more of, okay, why did you even go there? What do I do now with my original thought? It's
the question of what just happened.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, and sadly, when you are seeking knowledge, in some, we could even put it into the context of people's experience with church. Say you're in a service or at a service, and say the pastor says something that gets you thinking, and you go up and ask, well, what do you mean by this? And a very common phrase is, well, go read the Bible yourself. And or better, even another situation is where somebody has read their Bible, they have questions, and they go ask the questions, and the leader is, I don't know, either too busy or too prideful to say I don't know, or just I don't want to answer. I can't answer right now, and so go ask somebody else.
Right.
And that's a very sad reality when it feels like your knowledge is being controlled again, because let's face it, there is a history of that in the church. The Bible for a long time was printed in Latin intentionally to keep it out of the hands of the laypersons, and it would give at its authority, but more than authority, it would give power. It would give them the power that they wanted. And it's kind of weird thinking back on that, about what knowledge is and what it can be used for. I thought one great example of that, just a visual one, was in the movie Book of Eli. Did you see that?
Yes. I love that movie.
It was so good.
So underrated.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Oh, man. Oh, and Denzel Washington, he's such an excellent actor, especially with his eyes. He doesn't have to say a whole lot. You can just see it in his eyes of whatever he's feeling. But
ironic, because this movie's about a blind man, but go ahead.
Right. Well, I was going to say, for those of us who may be listening that haven't seen the movie, it is about a blind man who is traveling across an apocalyptic United States. And he stumbles across this town where he gets his iPod recharged by trading some stuff. But he, while in town, the guy who owns the town, is in charge of the town, finds out he's carrying a book. And this book is the Bible. And there's a conversation that the bad guy has with this lady that he has, and he said, this book has power, and I want that power. I want.
They don't know it's the Bible at that point, do they?
No, they do.
Oh, do they?
But they do. But the crazy part is they haven't opened the book yet. So when the guy he sends his cronies after him, and so when the cronies finally get the book and take it back to him, he opens it up. It's written in Braille. Yep, spoilers. It's written in Braille. So, and the crazy part is that he's been reading this book, the Bible, in Braille for years, and has it memorized. So when he finally gets to San Francisco, and there's more of a group of people that are more, let's say, socially minded, people minded, he's laying on a couch reciting all of it, and he's basically dictating because they're trying to save all this knowledge. So I mean, there's your quintessential movie right there about knowledge and how it can be used, and
how it can be used in the positive. Yes.
But I
also, while we're on the subject of within Christendom and church, I also want to talk about how, and we've addressed this in some degree in previous episodes, during our church series about the modern state of the Western Church and stuff, but about how for a couple hundred years at least, the view of discipleship has largely been grow one's knowledge. If I'm going to disciple someone, I need to educate you on things. And we've taken it to such an extreme that we make it all about knowledge and very little about obedience or practical anything, living it out.
Understanding.
Much less understanding. For me, knowledge, I know you're using the biblical definition of understanding, which is knowledge in action. But yeah, I think we've done a big disservice by making it a largely knowledge pursuit without the wisdom of putting it into practice and actually doing the things that Jesus taught.
Right.
I mean, the Great Commission itself, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you, not teaching them to recite all that I've commanded you. Or teaching them to be able to tell others the things I said.
Yes. Or let's take it this even bring it a little more into the personal zone. Believing what you know to be right, but not doing what you know to be right. Because if there's one great emphasis within Christianity and evangelicalism, it's believing what's right. It has really nothing to do about even using it whatsoever. Not only do you have the knowledge, but now do you believe that knowledge?
Yes.
Yeah.
And belief defined as more than I give a mental assent to this thing being true. Like I believe in gravity. Like, gravity's real. Sure.
Yes. Yes. And then the knowledge becomes more of your theology than anything else. And then when that knowledge is, when a conflict arises and that knowledge is challenged, then you feel like your whole world's being tipped over. And when we're talking about language before, Bible translations, I've come to appreciate the fact that yes, we have it in English. We have this first approach to the Bible, but English is only a paraphrase. And in some cases, it's more of that telephone effect where it started with Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic. And some of these Bible translations, they're going through, they might touch upon the original pieces, but they're now going through Latin and maybe some other language. But the reality is that it's not even the surface. We're not even breaking the surface yet. It might give us an ability to see the surface, but once we start digging in and drilling deep into the language that's originally being used and understanding the euphemisms and things like that, then we really begin to understand something very different. One of my favorites to read is a guy named Chaim Ben Torah. I know I've mentioned him before, but he's got these just basically one simple article word study that he'll do. And I'm currently reading one of his books of the Aramaic word study, Discover the Language of the New Testament. And last night, in fact, I actually read something that was quite interesting when he talked about the John 4, verse 23, when it says that the hour comes and now is when true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes into an explanation that, where is it? Oh, here it is. In Greek, the word for worship is proskuneo. Now watch this. This is a compound word, pros for throw or toward, and kineo for the word kiss. Worship is throwing a kiss to God. Well, maybe a little cultural background is needed. In Aramaic, the word is sagad, which comes from a loan word from the Middle Egyptian for an air kiss, as in air that you breathe. When the Egyptians worshiped their gods, they were not allowed to touch the idol even with a kiss. So they would breathe through their nostrils onto the idol, and that was considered a kiss or an air kiss. Air passing through the nostrils became known as an air kiss or sagad, and then later it was known as proskuneo, which being interpreted means to worship.
How interesting.
Right? And so while the English can introduce us to a concept, it's not giving us the concept. We really have to get even more into the mindset, which is why I like Michael Heiser so much. He says, I'd rather put you in the mindset of the actual first century person experiencing this, or even the ancient Israelite at Mount Sinai, rather than you trying to come up with ways of imagining or logically trying to deduce what you ascertain something to mean. Well, worship, because we could do it this way. Worship, we could identify it from a cultural practice of a church band. And if it's defined by a church band, what is it then if in another church they don't have a drummer or they don't have a pianist? Are you really getting that full experience of worship? And then again, you're identifying it more with what you're doing rather than it say the attitude or the heart of the matter of worship.
Right.
And so that leads into a whole other discussion. But you see where I'm going here, that this knowledge that we say we have, what are we grounding it on? What assumptions are we making? What expectations are we putting on it? And what is our own bias on it too? We're wanting it to go somewhere. And what person wouldn't want knowledge going somewhere and being used for a specific purpose?
Of course.
Is it being used in the original intended purpose, say that Jesus had when he was talking to the woman by the well?
Yeah.
Because here's another interesting tie-in. Because he's standing there at the well, and part of the language being used there that we don't really see on the surface is that there's some context going on relating to Joseph. Joseph's bones are buried within eyesight of that well. And if there's one thing he does, is he takes the knowledge that he's getting from these dreams and he's putting it before people that are not having the kindest of responses to the knowledge that he's getting in these dreams, right? And so, right there, you got this basically, what it was called, a lesson, good grief, observation lesson, where it's right in front of you and you can use that as an observation lesson of what you're even trying to explain. Because even in that own argument with Jesus, well, not argument, I would say more a discussion between Jesus and this woman is, our knowledge says there's only one place to worship.
Yep.
And it's at this place. And here's Jesus saying, I'm about to blow the lid off all of this. I'm going to take that knowledge you have and make you realize that, there's something else going on here with it. And so, just in that, now you start getting all those wild connections going, I see that here now. I see this here now in scripture. And it's all starting to make more sense, right?
It is. And I wanted you to take all the rabbit trails you could off of that, because that in and of itself was a really great example of knowledge used appropriately. Because I know you well. I know that you're not using, no, it's not an okay. you're not using the knowledge to try and puff yourself up or make me think you're super smart. You're trying to convey a concept.
Sure.
And it's a concept that will bless me and the listening audience.
Yes, sir.
So
absolutely.
So in this conversation, we're by no means saying that knowledge is bad inherently or overtly, but the I as is with so many things, I think it comes down to the motive. If we're trying to gain knowledge so that people think we're super smart, even up to and including ourselves, so that I can feel smart, so that I can think I have worth and value by how smart I am, and I can like who I see in the mirror because I perceive that person to be smart.
Right.
Or I want others to validate that I'm smart or whatever because of number of degrees or number of books I've read this week or whatever. And I can drop all the facts and figures and stuff. Or am I pursuing knowledge and understanding to better my relationship with God and others, to bless, to teach, to instruct for their betterment rather than my own?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And if we even took it on a philosophical level and say that the interaction, the bonding agent, the bonding practice that happens when sharing with somebody, and it's just simply knowledge. Knowledge lacks so much. It hasn't been carried through the internal process that when you finally convey something, even without words, it's going to have a more tangible grip and bonding two people together. Am I saying that well?
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying, right? So
I do.
So yeah, you get this random trivia. Great. You're sharing trivia. Great. But what happens when you start taking that trivia and just start processing it downwards, and it becomes more of a soulful practice and exercise, really a soulful exercise that ends up bringing together people in a much more meaningful fashion, rather than if you were just going to talk about knowledge, because then, well, we could use the words agnostic and stuff like that. But at the same time, understanding why we're acquiring knowledge and what our goal with it is can help us orient what we're trying to do in that moment. Because if you're just trying to, get some fun information that you can share with somebody else, such as, well, did you know that in the scene where Gollum and Bilbo are having their riddle, that there was a blooper that showed Martin Freeman stepping back too far, and then he accidentally hits a rock and he falls flat on his back. And Angie Serkis stays in character to say, "Are you okay, my precious?" It's just fun, right?
Absolutely. But even that, on the subject of why we're sharing trivia and stuff, because you and I are such supreme nerds when it comes to different topics.
Yes.
Certainly, there are more supreme nerds than us when it comes to Lord of the Rings. But
yes.
Because we both love and appreciate that series, we both, in sharing that trivia, it does bond us together more and more. Whereas if I walk up to some random person, or if I know you're not interested in Lord of the Rings or football or something, and I share a trivia fact with you on a subject that I'm aware that you're not interested in, or maybe we just say, I don't know if you're interested in this or not.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't really help build the relationship or build us closer together in that way.
Right. And then you start asking the question, well, what is a relationship built on? Is it built on knowledge? Is it built on mutual interest? Can you just simply sit down and just have a relationship built on small talk? Right. So it really challenges you to really look at language and go, and relationship and knowledge, all in this confining holistic concept, of what's happening and what the goal is for that happening. And it doesn't have to be that much harder.
Oh, not at all.
And I think that that's sometimes what we do with knowledge. We make it hard. I got to get all this. So, you're in college and you're cramming, and you've got all these other classes and you're trying to cram with that, and you're trying to get all this knowledge in your head. And it's just getting harder and harder to be able to process that knowledge. And sometimes you either need the space, you need the time, but I think in more ways you need the ability to be able to, as you would say in a conversation, you would hear what somebody has to say, then you'd say, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, and then you reiterate back to them maybe a little differently. But by doing that, you're showing active listening, but also the ability to more fully understand what's being conveyed to you, and thus be able to have a more deepening, more meaningful understanding and connection, and that's solidify that connection between people, as we were talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Boy, talk about a mind-bending philosophical word.
This was kind of philosophical, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it's very philosophical.
How out of character for us.
Right?
We never do this.
No, never. But then again, what does the proverb say? A word aptly spoken. Oh my, I forgot the other half. Do you remember the other half?
I don't. I was really hoping you weren't going to call on me. Speaking of not having the knowledge, yeah. Oh, man.
But to think these days, we don't really have to remember everything because it's right in our hands, and we can go, ooh, I got it.
Yep. Oh, man.
Good
Suffice it to say, the book of Proverbs has much to say on knowledge. Y'all should go read it. But yes, good conversation. Thank you for this today. Thank you. I almost said viewers. Thank you, listeners, for joining us as we got to discuss this. I just want to throw out there to our listening audience, thank you for your patience with us. We came back and we announced that we are back to recording, but that doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to get an episode out every week. There's still medical stuff going on. There's still, like, for example, tomorrow I leave Tucson at 5 a.m. to fly to Minneapolis again. And so there's just a lot going on in both of our lives. So we can't guarantee that we'll get an episode out every single week, but we hope that you enjoy the content. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, hopes, goals, dreams, aspirations, expectations, critiques, anything you got, send us an email at beardedbiblebrothers@gmail.com, and we'll talk to you next time.